everyone, and welcome back to the Spook Central podcast. It's been a while. Almost a year, in fact, since we've filmed our last episode. No one's missed us, but here we are. Two a-holes sitting in a chair.
Yeah.
So both of our hair is much longer now, as you can see with Nick's exceptionally so. And today, we're going to be covering a very large topic, one that I don't think we quite anticipated was going to be this large. This might end up being two segments, but we're just going to get right into it. Zombies. So, what's your experience with zombies in horror? I know you're not the biggest fan of them.
Yeah, so I don't much care for a lot of zombie movies. I think they tend to be predictable. They can follow a certain structure, to say. And I think one of the biggest issues in that is that there wasn't much innovation in the genre for a solid amount of time. So I felt like you were kind of just getting the same thing over and over and over again. And that's why I was like, this is oversaturated. There's no point in even watching these new movies until things like Train to Busan came out. And like that is the standout example of what like a good zombie movie is to me.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to make, and I think that's how a lot of people in the horror community feel. One of the main things for me is zombie movies, the good ones, are really good pieces of horror and often are also really good pieces of social commentary on top of that. But it's also, zombies are one of those things where they very quickly went into stereotypes and then just like satirical interpretations, such as like Shaun of the Dead obviously plays on a lot of those tropes. And there wasn't a lot of innovation for quite a long time, as you were saying, because basically after it changed to the Romero zombie, it was basically just stuck as that until about when 28 Days Later came out, which we'll get into that in a second here. And that's when things started to change. There started to be some development. Then obviously The Walking Dead came out, but then obviously we started getting some other stuff in there. But if we just want to get started on the long history of zombies here, we're going to go to some dark places today, which is going to be quite fun. We're going to go to some funny places, some legal loopholes, and other things like that. It's a long story. There's a lot to it. So just buckle up and let's get started with a fun English lesson. So, the term zombie was first apparently, I can't really find any sources that corroborate it. But the term first appeared in like English language around 1697, according to this source. But some other sources have it listed only appearing in the English language as zombie, spelled Zombie, in the mid to late 1800s, after the Haitian voodoo zombie had already been established, and obviously that's zombie that's spelled without the E at the end. So getting into that a little bit here, so the Haitian or voodoo zombie, which is really the original zombie and I guess the truest form of a zombie, is basically a folkloric legend out of Haiti that was born when Haiti was actually Saint Dominique, I think it's pronounced, which is basically just when it was under French rule, and most of their economy was based off of slave labor. Like I said, we're going to some fun places today. So obviously at this time, a lot of people were getting imported over from Africa, and a lot of them were dying or committing suicide in various different ways. All the atrocities that come with slavery and the horrors that exist in there. And so this initial Haitian zombie was not cannibalistic, but essentially just a forgotten husk of a man that was used just purely for labor. And it basically came from the fear of these Haitian slaves that even after death, they would still be put to work by their masters, and that there was really no true way to be set free even in death. There's a lot of other folklore stuff that I'm not exactly qualified to speak on that goes into that, such as things like, obviously slaves committing suicide was a big thing, but even still with that in basically like the Haitian and sort of African roots of that, it's more so like if you commit suicide, you're not going to go to some sort of good afterlife, and you'll basically be stuck in kind of a purgatory type of thing. Like I said, I'm not super qualified on that kind of stuff because we're here to talk about zombies. I'm a horror nerd. I like history, but it's not obviously something I have a degree in. So when we got into the 1800s, so the 19th century, it fully became engrossed in Haitian folklore. So obviously this is after the brutal revolution that happened with the revolt of the slaves against the French there, which is a whole nother story unto itself. And there's honestly a lot of room for talk of horror in that. But really that's real life horror and not the fun stuff that we're going to be talking about here. So I'm rambling on, and that's mostly what this is going to be, by the way. But this period in Haitian folklore is when the zombie started to become more mystical. It wasn't just the empty husk of a man who had just been controlled by his master. This is where we get sort of the voodoo elements in it, where it is either a reincarnated dead body or someone put under a spell by a shaman or some sorts. It depends what version you go with, but usually it would be basically either a dead body or a live person being put under the control of someone, and their body's used for usually malintended purposes. So, slave labor, but usually it's like, hey, you're going to go bomb this school or something like that. That's a modern day interpretation. Of course, I don't know how many schools were getting bombed back then.
You're going to kill somebody. You're going to do some unsavory things
you're going to bury
somehow.
You're going to bury this dead guy type of thing.
It was see, the thing is, my knowledge with zombies goes pretty in-depth here. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, zombies in early horror. And then I got really sick of them.
Yeah.
And I just went, I don't like zombies anymore. And then it was like when did Train to Busan come out? 2018?
2018, I think.
2018, and I was like, oh, cool. And then I got back into like zombie media. But like, there's a massive gap in here.
Yeah, and we'll get into that gap here.
But like the voodoo zombies are interesting because they, like you said, they weren't cannibalistic.
No, that was a later
It was
edition.
simply just, somebody to do somebody's bidding under the control of like this supernatural magic. Never started as a virus. It never started as this super quick incubation period pathogen that needed to just spread like wildfire. It was just one person under another person doing whatever that ruler wanted.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think zombies are one of those things where they've evolved so much in horror, and it's to the point where at some points they're almost recognizable, but then there's also things that you can tie back into that original origin there, where you still see sort of a shell of the former self within that. And I think that's why zombies are such a great thing to talk about with horror, is because if you want to talk about vampires, there's not much you can go with that. There's some evolutions, going into like Twilight and stuff, but you don't really want to talk about that.
The sparkly vampires.
Yeah, exactly. Or like even like these classic horror characters, like the Invisible Man. There's not a whole lot of innovation there. Like you can talk about modern interpretations and how they changed the way that he became invisible, but zombies are one of those creatures where it's so much of a like cultural shift as well, and it's really just. It's crazy to look at all the different things that connect into it within film and horror media as a whole, and all the different influences, and how it initially started out as sort of like the fears of slaves, and even still today is used to push forward social commentary, whether it's racial or just societal in general, with the way that we would deal with apocalypses and such. And we'll get into that later here. But with that, we should probably get into Haitian zombies and their transition into film. So obviously, the Haitian zombie is older than the art of film itself, but this is when Haitian zombies kind of started to be cannibalized, you could say, into an American perspective. So it's taken out of Haitian folklore, and now it's being pushed towards American audiences as a form of like popcorn horror, basically. Right? So it's no longer the fears of slaves, it's just the fears of, white suburbia, which has got to be one of my favorite things to talk about. So what this starts with is the release of the movie titled White Zombie, 1932, Bela Lugosi. Title tells you a lot that you need to know about how zombies were perceived at the time, where they felt the need to include the word white zombie to make it interesting to people, because zombies were seen as something that was voodoo and an other from a different country type of thing, right? So this is an American film. Like I said, it stars Bela Lugosi, which everyone pretty much knows as Dracula and many other Universal horror monster parts. And so this movie, which I haven't seen. I know, I'm disappointing. Oh well.
Didn't watch the movie.
I haven't seen
the,
every movie to ever
30s.
Exist.
Was it from the 30s, you said?
Yeah, 1932 is when this released.
Yeah, crazy. We didn't get our hands on the movie from the 30s.
It's pretty easy to get your hands on. I think it's free on Plex for streaming. Not sponsored. And yeah, so this still includes some folkloric elements like the shaman, but it also it doesn't even have the element of death in it yet, because I think sort of the main plot of the movie is this female is slowly getting turned into a zombie by this shaman, but she doesn't die. She just gets put under a sort of trance and has to do the bidding of it. So it still has that fear of not being in control of your own body that's there, but we're still not fully into, okay, yes, a zombie is something that is undead, right? And then there was a sequel released to that movie called Revolt of the Zombie. That was 1936. But the movie that I want to talk about more in 1936 is a lesser-known movie. It's called Uwanga, or The Love Wanga, which I have seen this movie, which is why I wanted to talk about it. It was banned in the U.S. For the longest time, purely because it deals with like interracial couples and relations and stuff, and it is one of the first instances on film of an interracial kiss. So a white man kissing a black woman. Although in the story of the movie, it's not that. It's just because the one actor was wearing blackface. Even more issues there. This is not going to be a thing on blackface. We're not going to get too in-depth into that. It's something to talk about, but not on a horror podcast. So, yeah, and that also will cause a flame war in the comments. All right. Anyway, so this still had a similar Americanization and also sort of featured the, I don't know what you would call it, the sort of like turning of this Haitian folklore thing and like turning of voodoo into something scary, where Americans see it as the other, and I don't know what you would like describe it. Do you know what I'm kind of saying with like where it's like you're turning it into something that's scary and an other, and you're not necessarily seeing the full truth of it?
I think it's the same way.
Is it demonization?
Yeah, you're demonizing somebody else's culture.
Yeah,
and it's like
just because you don't understand.
It's the same thing that a lot of countries do when they grab, like when they take a myth or a folklore or something from a country, they kind of take it and they run with it, and then it becomes, and then eventually within 50, 60, 70, 100 years, it becomes so far removed from what it was originally that it's like these are two separate creatures, and that's at the point we are now, where you look back and go, this is what a zombie was.
Yeah, the Haitian zombie is nowhere close to what the modern day zombie is. And I think that there is some issues with that, with cultural appropriation and everything. But it's hard to say if we should get rid of these other things that have been created out of it just because it's not what it truly is. I think we just need to more so have an understanding that they are two different things. But aside from that, something I want to compare it to is the demonization of like Native American folklore in a lot of cases, where that's very heavily used in a lot of horror movies as like the cause for certain, like even like Poltergeist, right? Like it's like, or actually no, not Poltergeist, but like there's other movies where it's like, oh, we're haunted because we're on a Native American burial ground, and it's like it's this very obvious thing where you like show all these things just because you don't understand what that culture is, and I think that's what this is.
Yeah, it kind of bothered me watching these like late 90s, early to even the 2010s horror movies where it was a cop-out to have something spiritual happen. Why did this happen? Why is something supernatural happening? It's a Native American burial ground, or it's a Native American reserve, or somebody died here, or whatever. And it's like, this is all stuff. It's stuff that you don't understand, and you're kind of just throwing these ideas to the wind because it's just because you can.
I think there is some exceptions to that. Like, not everything. Like, I feel like Twin Peaks is a good example of what to do in that case, because in Twin Peaks, David Lynch uses a lot of ideas from Native American folklore, including like owls and stuff like that. And he even has obviously Native American characters in that to like talk about certain things. But he spins it into his own thing and makes it very obvious that while it has some influences in that, it is not directly that, and he doesn't demonize it in any way, and he shows just as much good and bad. So I think that's a good example there of how to do that correctly. But moving over back to zombies, we get our first true evolution of zombies into the 50s here, where we still had the Haitian voodoo zombie, or at least the Americanized one that had been in film for a while now. So, so we were still getting movies like Voodoo Women, Teenage Zombies, really great titles, ones that we have all seen here. They're B movies. So for the longest time, zombie movies were B movies, as were a lot of different horror movies. The 50s, there was really no true horror, except for, you could say, like suspense thrillers from Hitchcock and whatnot. but really it was just like the prime of B horror movies. But with that, we got some other things where the zombie truly started to evolve into less of a folklore creature, whereas it's like voodoo and stuff like that, and more a sci-fi creature. So we have things like Plan 9 from Outer Space, one of the greatest movies of all time. It's literally cited as the worst movie of all time.
I've never seen
never
it,
seen
so I
it?
can't.
Okay,
I
the
can't
story
speak
of
on it.
Plan 9 is intense. There's a lot there. If you Ed Wood is do you know Ed Wood? The movie Ed Wood, Johnny Depp?
Not by name.
No. Okay. Tim Burton directed it. Arguably his best movie. Either way, it's about Ed Wood is the one who directed Plan 9 from Outer Space, and it's about his journey and whatnot. Plan 9 from Outer Space is also, I think it's the last film appearance of Bela Lugosi. So, yeah. Anyway, and then there's other movies like Zombies of the Stratosphere, and as we can see, we're getting more obvious sci-fi iterations here, where the zombies aren't caused by voodoo, and that is sort of what leads more so into the modern Romero zombie. One other thing that I put here just to touch on is there's a movie called Scared Stiff. Not what it sounds like. Stiff as in rigor mortis, not stiff as in... Anyway. So Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin. So this is the first venture into a comedy element with zombies, which we would later see pop back up in somewhat Return of the Living Dead, but also more so Shaun of the Dead. Major comedy elements there. Or even Zombieland, which I actually forgot to think about at all while researching this. But that was also a musical, so if you're looking for a zombie-related musical, Scared Stiff, that's the movie for you. But getting into further into this, now we're going to talk about probably the most in-depth part of this, which is the modern Romero zombie. So Nick, what are your experiences with the modern Romero zombie? What is your idea of it?
How far back do you go?
So, well, starting with Night of the Living Dead that's the birth of the Romero zombie.
I've seen bits and pieces here. I haven't sat down and watched the film. I know, but the thing, famously, even in the first episode of the show, I said I'm not a zombie guy. It's not my thing.
Yeah.
It's not a thing that I personally like. I've watched some of The Walking Dead. I've watched, like, Train to Busan. I've watched I have watched a fair amount of zombie movies. I just haven't actually delved into the genre. But when it comes down to this, which is also why I'm not speaking a lot in this episode, especially when you compare it to our last episode a year ago about Stephen King.
Oh yeah, I forgot that we did one on Stephen King. Yeah.
Anyway, go watch it.
I think our last one was actually the Western horror one.
Was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Last one I remember was Stephen King.
Yeah.
So go watch them.
They're on there.
They're on there. They're good. They're pretty good.
Less hair.
Just in general.
Less hair, though.
Yeah. So I don't know particularly how to say like whether or not I think the Romero zombie is like.
Well, how would you describe the Romero zombie? Is what I'm asking. Like,
well, I think it's more of like the rising from the grave, the whole like, it's the living dead. That's the whole idea. Is that it's a reanimated corpse by something supernatural still. But that's when isn't that the first instance of them wanting to be murderous?
Yes. Well, I mean, zombies are always more murderous.
Murderous in their own nature, not because they're being
controlled. Yeah, and then when we're getting into the sci-fi part of it, that's where it starts to be more. They start to devolve into cannibalism more so. But so the modern Romero zombie is something that took a while to evolve to its full point because when Romero released Night of the Living Dead in 1968, he didn't think of his creatures as zombies. In the script, they were just referred to as ghouls. And that's what the characters refer to them as, because at that point the only zombie was the Haitian voodoo zombie, and this wasn't that. So at first he considered it ghouls, and then only later, once we got to Dawn of the Dead, would he actually start referring to them as zombies and understand that the cultural shift had happened where what he created now has became the modern zombie. Something else to mention in Night of the Living Dead is a lot of people love to talk about the racial subtext in Night of the Living Dead with a black lead character getting lynched at the end, basically. Romero had always insisted, literally up until his death, that was unintentional. The casting of Dwayne Jones as the main character was simply just, he was the best fit for the role. And so any sort of commentary that came out of Night of the Living Dead, even though I think it is still very powerful to have that there as a piece of representation. It wasn't intentional, and that's okay. It can still be cited as something that can have a cultural impact without Romero actually needing to have tried to do that. Another thing that I want to mention is, so we were talking about the sci-fi zombie, and that's what Romero's ghoul was. It's briefly mentioned that there was something going on in Night of the Living Dead. It's briefly mentioned through a radio that there was something going on with the satellites, and it's heavily implied that the reason the dead were rising in Night of the Living Dead was because of something going on with the satellites and weird radio signals. It's not fully fleshed out, and he doesn't really go back to it in the sequels. But yeah, it's kind of extraterrestrial in the way that he's saying it. And I think he got away from that more because that is a more B-movie thing to just be like, oh, it's the aliens making the dead people rise. Whereas he just kind of took it as a more like, yeah, the dead people are rising. That's it. Just
They are because they are.
They simply are. It's just, when there's not enough room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. That's a quote from Dawn of the Dead.
It's a fair enough explanation.
Yeah.
Hell is full.
It's like actually the best quote from Dawn of the Dead. Speaking of which, so Dawn of the Dead was released literally a decade after Night of the Living Dead. So Romero had basically spent time after that just doing a bunch of random ass projects, different things from he did the amusement park, which just recently got refound and released, but just a crap ton of things, just basically trying to earn money, because he kind of fucked up with Night of the Living Dead because he didn't have the rights to it. They hired a shitty lawyer, I guess, or something like that, and he and his co-writer, what is his co-writer's name? Jack Russo was the co-writer, and we'll get into their relationship a little bit later because it is quite an interesting one. They didn't have the rights to the actual movie, which is why it is still in the public domain to this day and has always been in the public domain. And that's also one of the reasons why it is so popular, because it was always playing on TV. It was always playing at drive-ins and stuff like that because it was free to have. So a lot of people watched it, and so within that decade period leading up to Dawn of the Dead, Romero's new idea of a zombie really became cemented in American pop culture, which led to his Dawn of the Dead movie really hitting with a lot of audiences. And then by the time we get to Day of the Dead, it's really something that a lot of people were into. Let's see, what else do we got here? So, so he had to lose, so he went from Of the Living Dead to just Of the Dead, because the Of the Living Dead title now belonged to Jack Russo, because they had a fun little legal battle, and Jack Russo ended up with the name, the namesake for Night of the Living Dead, so he got the Of the Living Dead title. So Romero wasn't able to use that for the longest time, and that's how we have another skew off in the timeline of Return of the Living Dead, which we'll get into in a minute here. Something else that Romero did after, so not only did he accept his creatures as zombies, but he also accepted the ideas of social commentary and put in some very specific images and whatnot for different types of imagery to comment on racism and different things like that, such as an opening scene in an apartment complex where police are just straight up shooting unarmed black men. Now, they're zombies, so they're just killing the zombies and trying to protect people, but there's still the context of police just straight up going into an apartment complex and killing unarmed black men. And there's some very intense moments in this movie. And it wasn't like full social commentary, but there was elements of it that you could definitely pick through and probably write an essay on if you wanted to. So another thing is the zombies' look changed once again. So the ghouls in Night of the Living Dead were just basic people shambling around. Obviously, this is the slow zombie, very slow in Night of the Living Dead, I will add. I don't know how they got anywhere.
Just kept walking.
They just kept
The
going.
thing is,
They literally, they don't move their knees. They just...
Mm-hmm. That's why I think that at that point, to me, zombies were so boring, because there was no threat level to them.
Well, Romero always felt that the threat level of those zombies is the sheer amount of numbers, right? Although...
Just walk at a brisk pace.
Yeah, so they did speed up a little bit in Dawn of the Dead, but not too much, because Romero always felt that because they are undead and rigor mortis has set in, they shouldn't be able to walk briskly. Which is a fair enough point, but I do think that it is a little bit more fun when zombies run fast. But also, if you're able to successfully still instill horror while the zombies are moving slowly, like just have like the overwhelming power of them be the scary part, I think that's still just as good, but only if you can successfully do that. So the look of these zombies, I don't know if you've seen any clips from Dawn of the Dead, they're blue.
Oh, yes, they're the blue zombies.
Yes, the bluish gray makeup that used some sort of pancake powder to color their faces. They were supposed to just be gray, but the way it was photographed, I don't know what, it's just the type of color film that they were using. I ended up photographing blue in a lot of shots, but it was also very inconsistent.
I don't think that their coloring, I know that there are some people who think that the coloring was not good or it's kind of goofy. I think that the gray-blue idea kind of works well for zombies if you're sticking with the idea that they're just dead.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, it's got like a cold vibe
It's like
to
your skin is just devoid of all the color and like you've gone cold. That's why your skin is blue. It's like, I think
at this point you wouldn't be able to release something like that isn't sort of like a spoof or some sort of like commentary on
probably
it.
Not.
Because I think if you tried to do that seriously now, people wouldn't accept it because there's a certain amount of allowance for older movies sometimes when it comes to effects where people are like, oh yeah, it's just because it's old. They could do good effects. They could have done better makeup. They just tried something and it didn't work, and now it has become, like, people have become so used to seeing that in that context that it's okay, and that it's almost nostalgic in a way. But with that, right, Dawn of the Dead was financed purely because, that's the thing, George A. Romero was pretty much broke most of his career. So this movie was financed by famous Italian giallo filmmaker Dario Argento, which, do you know a lot about Argento?
No.
Never even heard his name?
I've heard the last name probably from you before.
Yeah, so Dario Argento directed things such as Suspiria. Suspiria is like the main thing. So if you know Suspiria, you know Dario Argento. Giallo horror, basically, so weirdly, Dawn of the Dead technically counts as a giallo horror film because giallo is just like the Italian term for horror. Mm-hmm. And so it's technically an Italian horror movie, despite the fact that it was filmed in Michigan with an all-American crew, all-American cast, just Italian financiers. This also led to another very interesting part of this timeline, and this is about to get very complicated, so screw your head on.
Stop yawning.
Because you're tired, man.
Yeah.
All right, so what we have here for the timeline. So we have Night of the Living Dead. And then the sequel, Dawn of the Dead. However, Dawn of the Dead is released in Italy and some other European countries as Zombie. It's just called Zombie. That's what it's called. And then after this, Romero obviously continues his journey with Day of the Dead, but the Zombie, which Dawn of the Dead, gets a sequel, an Italian-made sequel called Zombie 2. Makes sense, Zombie 2. So that's technically a direct sequel to Dawn of the Dead, Zombie, although it features none of the same cast, none of the same returning people, except it was also produced by Dario Argento, and it was directed by Lucio Fulci. I think I mispronounced that.
It's Italian.
Yeah, it's Italian. Lucio Fulci, another major giallo director, though. And then that also got a sequel called Zombie 3. Now, these movies were also released in the States at one point. So, because in the States, Zombie 1, the original Zombie, is Dawn of the Dead, because it's the same fucking movie, Zombie 2 was released as Zombie. So, now we have Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Zombie 2, and Zombie 3. However, if you're American, you have Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, that's it, and then you have Zombie 2 and Zombie 3. Although actually for you, it's just Zombie and Zombie 3, because when they released Zombie 3, they just released it as Zombie 3. So if you're American, Zombie 2 does not exist. It's going to get more complicated after this.
Dear.
So, remember how I was talking about Jack Russo earlier and how he got the rights to the Living Dead title? So he wrote a book called Return of the Living Dead, which was then turned into a movie called Return of the Living Dead, which is a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. So we have another timeline here. So we now have Night of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead, and its various sequels. I'm not going to list them all off. I think there's 4. And then we have Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and then Day of the Dead. And then we have Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead / Zombie, Zombie 2, and Zombie 3. Tell me how that works.
Man,
I would like you to watch all of these movies in that order for me.
can you list them in chronological order for me?
Chronological.
No.
Like when
Sorry.
they were
Can you list them in order of like when I should watch them, as in like when they take place, like how it would be like you watch Star Wars, like Phantom Menace.
No, but the thing is, they don't exist in the same universe, Nick. These are separate universes. It's like with the fucking Halloween timeline.
Oh God! Don't even start.
So like literally like
Halloween's timeline is so annoying.
Yeah, a lot of horror timelines are annoying. Honestly,
No,
the
but,
only
like-
straightforward one is Friday the 13th.
No, because Hellraiser's timeline is relatively straightforward,
I guess.
and surprisingly so is Child's Play.
Okay,
The
yeah, that's
timeline
true.
just.
Halloween's timeline is
It's not that the
messy.
timeline in Child's Play is bad. It's just the excuses that they make are really shitty.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like you can go the Halloween route of being like, new
like
universe.
reboot, yeah.
Or you can go the Child's Play route and go, lightning, animation, new stuff, and it's just like,
But
sure.
yeah. So so like literally that's the thing. There's no the best way if you wanted to watch the whole Romero zombie, non-Romero zombie,
What would you even call it? How many movies are there? There's 6, 7?
There's a lot. Well, that's the thing. I don't remember how many.
Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead,
Zombie 2, Zombie 3,
Return of the Dead.
Return of the
Or
Living
Return of the
Dead,
Living
Return of
Dead.
the Living Dead 2, Return
3
of the
and
Living
4.
Dead 3. I think there's because I think
There's 4, then that's 9.
Hold on, let me see here. Return of the Living.
We're very prepared.
I was prepared. It's just there's not the book. No, show me the other ones. Sequels. Series. There we go. Okay. So we have Return of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead 2, Return of the Living Dead 3, and then we have 2 movies released in 2005, both called Return of the Living Dead. What? Oh wait, no. All right, sorry. One's Necropolis, and then the other
Is Necropolis a
is
direct
Rave to the Grave.
sequel?
I don't think they are sequels. I think it's just they have the same title. So let's just say go to Return of the Living Dead 3 and end it
So
there.
you have 8 movies you have to watch to get the full Romero zombie
Yes.
experience.
It's not even Romero though. Like literally only 3 of those movies are Romero. Like
Well, because
so,
Zombie 2 and Zombie 3 aren't.
No, they're Lucio Fulci.
Yeah, and then the Return of the Living Dead and Return of the Living Dead 2 and Return of the Living Dead 3
Yeah.
are not Romero.
No, I don't remember. Well, the first one was directed by Dan O'Bannon.
I was
Which,
like, oh, this
do you
episode's not
recognize? Do you recognize the name Dan O'Bannon?
Maybe just because it sounds funny.
You know the Alien movies,
Yeah.
right? All right. So the original script for Alien was first put together by Dan O'Bannon.
But I didn't direct it.
He didn't direct it. Ridley Scott directed the original. But Dan O'Bannon is he's such a complicated figure in horror because he hasn't accomplished much, but he's made such a mark just because of how much of an asshole he can be. Because there's so much controversy around how much of Alien is to thank for him, because so many people worked on that fucking script, including Ridley Scott. Mm-hmm. So it's Dan O'Bannon.
If I was Dan O'Bannon, I'd be like, I did Alien. That was me. This is my script. I did this. Give me money.
Yeah,
you gotta play your bit.
Speaking of which, Return of the Living Dead is a wild movie.
Have you watched it?
I have seen it. I haven't seen the sequels, but
When was
I
it
have
released? 90 something?
seen Return of the Living Dead, 1985.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
and then the sequel was 88, and then the third one was 93.
Okay.
But no, so Return of the Living Dead is fully engrossed in 80s pop punk goth culture, and it's a beautiful thing. It's also peak 80s cheese.
Mm.
So it was directed by Dan O'Bannon, which already puts it in horror, but it also stars Tom Matthews, who played what's the kid's name from Friday the 13th? The one that was played by Corey Feldman, then was played by the dude from fucking yeah. I think it's Corey, isn't it?
Is it?
I think so.
I don't know.
Friday the 13th. Having a computer here is so great.
Right?
No, we need part 4. Part 4. No, I'm thinking Corey because it's Corey Feldman. It's Tommy Jarvis. All right, so he played Tommy Jarvis in the 6th one, I think, because the 5th one, yes, because in Jason Returns. Anyway, so there's that as well. So it's just like it's a crazy thing of horror, and it's really fun to watch. I recommend you watch it. There's one point where like an alt chick just strips naked in a cemetery.
Sold. Sold. That's it.
Favorite part of the movie. And then she's naked for the rest of the movie because she strips naked, and then the zombies start rising from the grave, and she has to run the fuck out of there. So she's like slipping through mud and shit, and just buck ass naked.
Sold.
And like I'm just like, how do you get a part like that? Like you come in and they're just like, so we have a role for you, but are you okay with nudity? Yeah, I'm fine with a little bit of nudity. Awesome. You're spending most of the movie naked. Getting into Return of the Living Dead just a little bit more. So we already talked about the Jack Russo part, but what I want to talk about is the zombies in Return of the Living Dead. I would say Return of the Living Dead is where a lot of these zombie stereotypes started to emerge. A lot of people think Romero's zombies are those stereotypes. They're not. Romero's zombies never were looking specifically for brains. They were just cannibalistic. Whereas in Return of the Living Dead, they specifically ask for brains. They're moaning. They're being like, brains, you know.
Plants vs. Zombies.
Yeah, we're going to get into Plants vs. Zombies later. We're going to talk about that for a solid half hour.
Like we already have been talking about Romero for a half hour?
No, only like 15 minutes. Anyway, feels like a half hour.
Feels like that. There's so much. It feels like that we're not even like halfway up the mountain that is a zombie.
No, well, because we're literally only in the 80s.
Yeah, we still have to go all the way up to 2023. Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Like I said.
This is not going to be a one-part episode.
It might be. We might be able to get there. Anyway.
No, we will not.
No, we probably won't. Anyway, so with that, we also had things like them talking, which Romero's zombies never really did. They just kind of grunted and moaned. We also get things such as we also get them moving faster in this, like they're straight up running after police cars in this movie. And also, which is probably another part Romero really hated, there's one zombie, well, I guess two, because there's also the Tar Man, which is a really fun looking creature. But there's literally one zombie that's straight up just a skeleton with eyes. Straight up, it's just literally so it's a skeleton, no like muscular system at all, and it's walking around, but it also has eyes. So it's like you're decaying. I think it also has eyelids. Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, I think it has eyelids as well. And then the Tar Man also is more of a zombie, but it's still just like a zombie covered in tar.
Oh, I've seen this before.
What, the Tar Man?
No, the eyeballs.
The eyeballs, one. Yeah, it's weird.
It's just eyes and eye socket.
No, there's eyes in there, though.
No, yeah, like he has the eye, but he also, like the muscles around the eye socket.
Yeah. Oh, wait, does he have the muscles around it?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, and then like the Tar Man looks really cool. But so this is where we're getting into full trope territory, basically shitting on Romero. But I mean, you can't blame Jack Russo too much because like he is the co-writer of Night of the Living Dead. They technically created this together. But then Romero did all his own stuff after that. Finishing off with Romero, though, we should probably get into Day of the Dead, which I briefly touched on.
What if it's better to leave this and try and start fresh?
Start fresh?
Sorry, because we're 40 minutes down, right?
Yeah.
This has been a long road to get here.
Okay.
But I think pacing-wise,
go into this
for us,
more later.
It's going to be nice to not just sit here and gab on for another 15 minutes and go, we're at an hour, we have to stop.
Okay.
And for everybody who's watching to not hear us ramble about something for another 15 minutes and rather to say, hey, let's start fresh, because then for the second episode, which is definitely going to have to happen,
yeah,
to not have to be like, okay, well now I have to watch the second episode. That's jumping in and yada yada yada. Viewership. I'm thinking about you guys.
Yeah, you guys are getting way more content because that way we don't have to rush this and cut it down. You get another 40 minutes of two assholes speaking. Anyway, so yeah, so we can end it here. So if you want to hear about Day of the Dead and finish up with Romero, come check us out next time.
Yeah.
And we'll get more into the next evolution of zombies.
My favorite.
Yeah, so...
well, closer to my favorite.
Yeah, well, we'll see you guys later, hopefully. And
maybe not in a year again.
Yeah, no, definitely not in a year again. We won't make you wait a year for a part 2. After that, probably
my hair will be twice as long. Again.
Yeah, his hair is gonna be down to his ass.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we'll see you guys later, and we'll catch you on the spooky side.